In the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Ukraine keeps doing what Russia can't predict: hitting hard, hitting deep, and hitting where it hurts most. This strike is another example. The moment the first detonation rolled across the harbor, most people standing along the shoreline thought they were hearing thunder, something far off and harmless, maybe a storm forming somewhere beyond the horizon. But within seconds, the shockwaves grew into a dense, bone-deep vibration that cracked windows, rattled steel, and sent ships trembling against their moorings. What hit the main port that morning wasn't weather. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misfired training weapon. It was the unmistakable signature of a Flamingo missile strike, the kind that analysts had discussed for years as a hypothetical worst-case scenario, but which no one actually believed would be unleashed on civilian port infrastructure. The kind built around a 1,000-kilogram warhead, engineered to collapse concrete, rip through cargo hulls, ignite fuel stores, and disable an entire supply chain in under 30 seconds. The port that had always felt indestructible, with its walls of steel, its deep water loading docks, its endless rows of cranes and containers, suddenly felt strangely fragile under the bright light of the explosions that bloomed in slow, terrifying succession. When investigators later tried to reconstruct the timeline, the first thing they noticed was how little warning anyone had. The Flamingo missiles flew low, lower than what most radar stations were calibrated to catch, skimming the ocean's surface in a pattern designed to reflect nothing but chaotic noise back into the scanners that were supposed to notice them. Defense crews saw nothing until a faint streak appeared on one thermal display. But by then, 2 missiles were already seconds from impact. The first slammed into the northern cargo terminal, the exact area storing the port's high-value electronic imports. Engineers had built that terminal with reinforced walls and shock-absorbing foundations. But the incoming warhead wasn't the kind that stopped at the first layer of defense. It drilled through the metal like a needle through fabric, embedding itself deep inside the foundation before its delayed fuse activated. The second missile hit the fuel processing line. That was the moment everything changed from a precision strike to a cascading disaster. Fuel vaporized, pipelines ruptured, generators exploded, and the fireball shot up almost twice the height of the cranes that once towered over the harbor. Flames whirled like a crimson tornado, feeding off the oxygen sucked inward by the blast. For 30 straight seconds, the entire port looked like the inside of a furnace. And even as emergency alarms echoed across the coastline, the disaster was only beginning. A third missile, which analysts originally thought had malfunctioned, suddenly reappeared on satellite footage. It circled back at a low angle and hit the administrative wing. A section of the building folded in on itself, as though imploding in slow motion, sending clouds of dust and pulverized concrete into the air. At that moment, no one knew how many missiles there were. No one knew if more were coming. People ran in every direction, some trying to reach shelters, some trying to help others, some frozen in place, unable to process what they were witnessing. Within minutes, the fires grew large enough to be seen from 8 kilometers away. The smoke plume climbed high enough to be picked up by civilians filming on their phones, sharing footage that spread across social platforms long before official statements appeared. And as always happens in moments of chaos, rumors replaced facts. Some claimed a refinery had exploded. Others said a ship carrying munitions had detonated. Others blamed a chemical plant. But none of those theories could explain the synchronized pattern, the precision of the hits, the angles of impact, or the seismic data showing subsurface detonation wavelengths. Only one explanation fit the evidence, and it was the one investigators feared most. High-precision Flamingo missiles with 1,000-kilogram shaped energy hybrid warheads. To understand how such a weapon could cause $6 billion of damage in a matter of minutes, you have to understand what the Flamingo actually is. It's the product of 15 years of iterative engineering, developed through a series of classified trials that progressively pushed the boundaries of range, stealth, and destructive yield. What makes the Flamingo different from conventional cruise missiles isn't just the weight of its warhead. 1,000 kilograms is massive, yes, but plenty of weapons carry heavy payloads. What sets the Flamingo apart is the energy distribution method, the way the internal geometry of the warhead forces the explosion into a tapered, compressed thrust that multiplies structural penetration far beyond what its size suggests. Instead of dispersing energy outward in a wide radius, the Flamingo focuses it inward first, using pressure-graded chambers to accelerate the burn. Only then does it release the full blast. This creates a tunneling effect. Walls don't just crack, they collapse from inside. Foundations don't just shift, they disintegrate. When you combine that with pinpoint guidance, the results become catastrophic. The missile's guidance system was another factor that investigators kept returning to. It wasn't standard GPS alone, because the port had anti-jamming systems. It wasn't pure terrain mapping either, because the curvature of the shoreline made some of the approach angles too complex for a basic autopilot. Analysts eventually concluded that the missiles used a hybrid navigation suite, capable of referencing maritime infrared signatures, wave patterns, and coastal heat gradients simultaneously. By doing so, the missile could build a dynamic map of its environment even with electronic countermeasures in place. And because it flew so low, the sea acted like a mirror, bouncing the missile's exhaust heat downward instead of outward, masking it from long-range detection systems. But if the missile was so sophisticated, people wondered how it was even acquired, who fired it, and why the main port was chosen as a target. Those questions led investigators down a complicated path. There were hints of covert procurement networks involving rogue states and private brokers. There were reports of stolen prototypes. There were even whispers of industrial espionage. But none of those explanations were sufficient to account for the precision and reliability displayed during the attack. Whoever launched the missiles had access not just to hardware, but also to training, simulation access, and technical maintenance protocols. Even a state with the resources to buy such weapons would struggle to operate them without the right expertise. When intelligence teams analyzed satellite traffic logs from the previous 72 hours, they noticed a pattern. Small vessels moving far outside standard shipping lanes, switching off their transponders for short intervals, then reappearing miles away with slightly altered headings. On their own, those deviations meant nothing. But combined with the missile trajectories, they suggested a sea-based launch platform. That discovery raised further questions, because the range of the Flamingo meant the launch vessel had to be relatively close to the coastline, inside the detection net. How a ship managed to come that close without being flagged became one of the central mysteries of the investigation. While intelligence agencies tried to trace the launch origin, forensic engineers on the ground worked through the charred wreckage of the port. What they found told a clear story. The first detonation created a crater on the northern side, but what was striking wasn't the size of the crater. It was the depth. The rupture went through the concrete slab, through the reinforced sublevel, and down into the service tunnels 3 layers beneath. For a missile to reach that depth without losing structural integrity requires a casing made from a composite high-density alloy. the type used only in weapons designed to pierce bunkers. When samples were analyzed, the alloy composition matched no commercially available metal blends. Whoever built the Flamingo used a proprietary reinforcement process, which meant the weapon came from a highly advanced manufacturer. The second impact site was even more revealing. The fuel processing line wasn't just destroyed, it was vaporized in parts. Pipes turned into ribbons of molten metal that twisted into strange spirals as they cooled, a pattern caused only by extremely rapid thermal shock. That level of heat suggested that the warhead wasn't just kinetic, it contained an incendiary compound that activated milliseconds after the initial blast. That compound, later confirmed through trace analysis, was a volatile fuel-air mixture engineered to create high-temperature plasma arcs. These arcs crawled across the ground, igniting everything they touched. That's why the fireball grew so violently and so fast. And because the incendiary compound burned briefly but intensely, the fires left behind odd cold patches where everything had been consumed before firefighters even reached the area. The third missile's impact revealed something else. The attack wasn't random. The administrative wing controlled port logistics, crane movements, cargo identification, fuel oversight, customs evaluation, and digital manifest synchronization with international carriers. Destroying that building wasn't about casualties. It was about crippling the port's operational intelligence. When officials tried to restore databases, they discovered shredded servers, melted wiring, and a collapsed network hub. Even systems that survived were offline because connectivity lines beneath the structure were severed by the blast pattern. The port was essentially blind. Repairs weren't just expensive, they were slow. Every crane needed structural examination. Every warehouse required stability tests. Every bridge, crane rail had to be recalibrated. The underground service tunnels, many filled with debris or water, took weeks to assess. And just as the early estimates began to circulate, the financial teams were already calculating the losses. Not just the physical destruction, but the shipping delays, reroutes, penalties, stranded cargo, rerouted fleets, insurance payouts, destroyed goods, and international ripple effects. By the time the numbers stabilized, the projected damage reached $6 billion. Some believed the figure was conservative. The deeper investigators dug, the more they realized how coordinated the strike truly was. The port's defense grid wasn't outdated. It wasn't underfunded. It wasn't offline. It was simply outmaneuvered. The radar stations that should have detected incoming threats were calibrated for higher flight paths. The infrared sensors were tuned to ignore low-altitude thermal noise because the coastline always produced false positives. The anti-missile defenses were built around intercepting threats approaching from predictable arcs. The Flamingo missiles didn't follow those arcs. They followed the contours of the waves, riding each upward swell and downward trough, adjusting their path every few milliseconds. One engineer who reviewed the telemetry remarked that the missile didn't fly like a projectile. It flew like a predator. As the days passed, geopolitical tensions rose. Nations demanded explanations. Some pointed fingers. Others called for restraint. The country whose port was attacked insisted that it would not retaliate without definitive proof of responsibility. Intelligence agencies raced to trace the missile fragments to known manufacturers, but the origin marking plates had been deliberately removed. Serial numbers were etched off using high-temperature microabrasion tools. Even the internal guidance chips were sanded to remove identifiable signatures. Yet small clues remained. One of the chips had a microscopic calibration defect consistent with a particular East Asian lab. a wiring harness had a polymer coating used by only 2 defense companies. These pieces together formed a vague outline, but not a complete picture. Meanwhile, leaked documents began circulating online, claiming the attack was a retaliation for an earlier covert operation. Other leaks suggested it was a rogue strike by a breakaway faction. Some claimed it was a live fire demonstration for potential buyers. None of the theories held strong enough evidence, but the speculation triggered another wave of international concern. Markets reacted. Insurance companies raised rates. Shipping companies hesitated to dock at ports considered high risk. The global supply chain felt the shock almost immediately. But beneath all the political maneuvering and intelligence races, the most disturbing truth was the one analysts discussed quietly behind closed doors. The attack proved that ports, even heavily defended ones, were vulnerable to modern low-altitude, sea-skimming missiles with hyper-focused warheads. If 3 missiles could disable a port and cause billions in damage, then any country with similar technology could repeat the scenario. The psychological impact was enormous. People began questioning the security of coastal infrastructure worldwide. When engineers reconstructed the missile's flight pattern using debris analysis and satellite scans, they discovered a final disturbing element. The missiles didn't just fly low. They followed slightly different altitudes and angles, almost as if mapping multiple vulnerabilities to ensure maximum impact. This indicated that the operator had detailed knowledge of the port's structure, layout, cargo distribution, and weak points. Someone had studied the port well in advance. The intelligence community then shifted its focus to 6 months of drone sightings, cyber intrusions, and unexplained sensor outages around the harbor. Several anomalies now seemed connected. A drone that crashed into the water near the port 3 months earlier was dismissed at the time as a civilian device. Now it looked like a reconnaissance unit. A brief cyber disruption that froze crane movements for 10 minutes was originally attributed to software bugs. Now it appeared coordinated. Even a suspicious fishing vessel spotted near restricted waters seemed more relevant. As analysts pieced these elements together, a clearer narrative emerged. The attack wasn't spontaneous. It was planned meticulously over months, perhaps even a year. This level of preparation suggested a state-level actor or a highly funded faction with significant resources. The port had been mapped digitally, its vulnerabilities cataloged, its defenses measured, and its operational routines monitored. The approach vectors were chosen deliberately to exploit sensor blind spots. The timing of the strike coincided with peak shipment volume to maximize economic damage. Nothing about the attack was accidental. When the first official report was released, it confirmed the worst fears. The Flamingo missile variant used in the attack was a customized model with extended fuel capacity, deeper casing reinforcement, and an advanced thermal masking exhaust unit. These modifications weren't available on the standard export versions. They required specialized manufacturing capabilities. This meant the attackers either had direct access to a highly advanced weapons facility or had support from someone who did. In the weeks that followed, salvage crews worked tirelessly to remove the shattered remains of cranes, twisted steel beams, and melted containers. Divers explored underwater wreckage to recover evidence from the seafloor. Satellite companies offered high-resolution imagery to assist with reconstruction. International experts flew in to help with the analysis. But progress was slow. Fires continued smoldering for nearly a week in some areas. Toxic chemicals leaked into the water. Parts of the port were declared unsafe for months. The financial toll kept rising. Yet even amid the wreckage, one question remained louder than all others. What was the motive? Why attack a port? Why now? Why with such precision? Some argued it was economic sabotage meant to destabilize the region. Others believed it was a message, a demonstration of capability. A smaller group suggested it was a misunderstanding, the result of false intelligence or misinterpreted signals. But the overwhelming majority of analysts believed the attack was strategic. Ports are lifelines. They fuel economies. They connect nations. Crippling a major port sends ripples throughout the world. And whoever orchestrated the strike understood exactly how deep those ripples would go. The most unsettling conclusion came from a classified briefing weeks later. Intelligence analysts determined that the attack could have been far worse. The missiles targeted critical nodes, but they avoided civilian passenger terminals, fuel tankers near residential areas, and chemical warehouses that, if hit, would have caused mass casualties and environmental devastation. The attackers had the capability to cause a humanitarian catastrophe and chose not to. That restraint wasn't comforting. It was chilling. It meant the attackers were sending a message. They could do more if they wanted to. Months later, as the port continued its slow recovery, global defense organizations met to discuss countermeasures. New radar protocols were drafted. New coastal defense strategies were proposed. Ports worldwide began updating their sensor arrays. But everyone understood that defense is always slower than offense. And the Flamingo missile attack had proven that whoever develops low-observable, high-precision weapons with focused impact warheads holds a distinct advantage. The world had changed that morning when the 1,000-kilogram warhead slammed into the harbor. The shock waves that rippled across the water were nothing compared to the geopolitical ones that followed. And even as officials vowed to rebuild, investigate, and strengthen defenses, the lingering fear remained. Somewhere out there, someone had the capability, the knowledge, and the willingness to deploy weapons like the Flamingo with chilling accuracy. And until the responsible party was identified, detained, or deterred, every coastal city, every major port, every maritime hub would live with the question that no defense minister wanted to say out loud. If it happened once, what stops it from happening again? The port's skyline eventually began to return, cranes rising like skeletal giants against the horizon. But beneath the visible reconstruction, the invisible wounds remained. Trade routes had been rerouted. Contracts had been renegotiated. Military advisors now watched every vessel that entered territorial waters. People who once walked the docks with casual confidence now scanned the sky without realizing it. Life returned, but not the same life. Something fundamental had shifted. And while the investigations continued, quietly, methodically, relentlessly, the truth lingered in the background like a shadow. The strike wasn't merely an act of destruction. It was an announcement, a demonstration, a carefully calculated test of what modern warfare could achieve with just 3 missiles, a low flight path, advanced camouflage, and a warhead engineered to collapse an entire port's operational backbone. $6 billion in damage was the official figure, but the cost in trust, stability, and security was far higher. And long after the debris was cleared, long after the new terminals were built, long after the last insurance payout was processed, the memory of those detonations would remain. The Day 3 Flamingo missiles slipped silently across the waves, evading every defense, striking with surgical precision, and rewriting the future of coastal security forever. Outro, what we've explored today is only one perspective, one path through a much larger landscape. Stay curious, keep thinking, and continue the search for deeper meaning.